Everyone feels the economy is sinking in the European Union. They all decided to go in on the sanctions against Russia. They blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. They lost all the cheap energy, and so they're sinking. At the end of the day, what you have is incompetent leadership all across the board. Russia, for them, is the distraction that they do not want to give up. Keep the war going and the Russian boogeyman alive and keep their people in fear. Russia can continue this for many, many years going forward, while Europe and the United States cannot. When they want to go in your bank and they want to take the money, they will take it. I've lived it twice, man. Banks crashed. The European Union came in and they took everyone's money. The agenda was never to bail out and save the banks. The agenda was to give this thing a trial run. You better be prepared and you better act fast, or there's really not much you can do, man.
World War III is already happening.
This is a house of cards, and it is in the process of collapsing right now.
You're going to see an economic crash, the likes of which we've never seen.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today's guest has been a long time coming. Alex Christoforou, a Cyprus-based citizen journalist, I suppose you could say, an analyst, kind of an average Joe like me trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And he's the co-host of The Duran with Alexander Mercouris, and he posts daily long-form analysis videos. And I think we had our first communication when we were exchanging messages probably about a year and a half ago with ado with Gonzalo Lira. And may he rest in peace. And I find that a lot of our audiences are certainly overlapped. You know, some people lean a little bit more pro-NATO. Some people sympathize more with the Russian aspect of things. But what I've always liked about your take on things is you seem to be open to entertaining and discussing all points of view. And I think that's very important if we want to have an accurate assessment of the battlefield, because I think oftentimes some people are blinded by their own bias. As a prepper, I want to know what's really going on, right? Like, just in the most dispassionate way possible to get a accurate understanding of where things are heading in the future. Now, you're right there in Europe, and we started off talking about how things are going. What is the situation in Europe right now? Like, what is the sentiment there with respect to this war? Like the state of the economy? I mean, are people ready for World War III, or is the economy just going into the pisser like it is here in Canada?
Yeah, it's definitely going into the pisser, no doubt about it. I would say there's a bit of a difference between, say, the Southern European states and let's just say the North European. I think the general sentiment across Europe is no one's going to go fight in a war. No one wants to fight in a war, whether they're pro-Ukrainian or pro-Russian or in the middle. They don't care. I don't think anyone wants to go into a war on behalf of Ukraine or on behalf of the EU globalists or anything like that. Even if they love the EU and even if they're pro-EU, no one wants to go to war. So I think that's a common sentiment throughout Europe. I would say that in the South, you tend to have the population more skeptical of government, more cynical. I would say they're probably more anti-EU globalist, where in the North, they're more trusting of the government. They're probably more pro-EU, but that's changing, man. That's changing as well. I mean, look at Germany. You know, you have the rise of the AfD in Germany. You have Macron's popularity is at what, 10% now or 15%,
Jeez.
And Le Pen is the dominant force. But we'll see how Le Pen is if she's elected. We don't know. She may turn out to be like Meloni.
Yep.
But yeah, but we'll see. The sentiment is there. People want a change, and they're tired of the globalist type of rule. So I think that's where you are in Europe. I mean, everyone feels the economy is sinking in the European Union. Some countries are a little better. I'd say Cyprus, because we're small. There's really not much to look after as far as the economy here. It's a pretty small, simple economy. But you look at economies like Germany crumbling, France, bad shape. The UK, not in the EU, but also in bad shape. I mean, they all decided to go in on the sanctions against Russia. They blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. They lost all the cheap energy. They lost all of that, and they can't walk it back, man. And so they're sinking.
A lot of people always hold out what I think is false hope for a new leader comes in, like Meloni, as you say, and they're going to take a more dovish kind of approach to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. And it never turns out that way. In fact, I almost think that these dire socioeconomic circumstances that are percolating are going to be used and ultimately weaponized towards further war mobilization. Because you and Brian Berletic and Alex, the other Alex, were talking yesterday about how, Europe is reaching this point of desperation, the war hawks there, and that the circumstances are ripe for some kind of provocation, dare I say, false flag, some event, either real, imagined, or contrived, that will be used as some sort of catalyst for channeling this socioeconomic immiseration into the Russians, and to try to build up that Russophobia to an extent where it can be used for war. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that they're reaching that point of desperation, especially in Ukraine? Because this is the problem, as we approach this point of peril with the Ukrainians, the incentive for them to potentially do something crazy increases, to throw a wrench into the whole thing. What's your thinking on that? And do you have any afterthoughts on that conversation?
Yeah, you're spot on, man. I agree with you. I think what you're dealing with in Europe, and I imagine you're also dealing with it in Canada as well, is incompetent leadership, man. I mean, you guys went from Trudeau to Carney, right?
God.
It's hard to tell which one's worse. I mean, in a way, Trudeau's better because he's so clownish.
Yes.
And it's so in your face that at least you see it, right? And it's there. Where Carney has this facade to him, this banker facade that he has around him, so you can be deceived by him. But really, their policies are not much better. I would say that.
They're exactly the same. Yeah. They're, if not worse.
Yeah.
But you're right.
But he covers it with the suit. He's more, more proper. He's not as crazy in his disposition as Trudeau was. He doesn't have this actor thing to him. So he's this banker guy, the trusted hands of a banker, right? That's Carney, right? The Bank of England and all of that stuff. So I mean, at the end of the day, what you have is incompetent leadership. All across the board, right? All these guys are incompetent. I don't think they know how to solve the problems of their countries. I really don't think they know. I don't think they know. I don't even think they're interested, to be quite honest. I really don't think they're interested in even trying to solve the economic problems of their countries. They probably don't know where to start, and they're not interested. They prefer hanging out with each other. They prefer going to their summits, their meetings, their G7s, their EU meetings, their WEF meetings, whatever, their conferences that they go to. It seems almost every other day. The Western leaders are at some conference or some event, and they're hugging and they're laughing and they're talking about spending more money on NATO and on weapons and defeating Russia and Putin's bad and all of these things. And that's where that is where Russia comes into the picture. Russia for them is the distraction that they do not want to give up. But I think the distraction has taken them over as well. It's been a distraction for so many years, and it's almost turned into this obsession where now it's dominating their policy across the board, across all administrations. And so they will do whatever they have to do to keep the war going and to keep the Russian boogeyman alive and keep their people in fear of Putin and Russia. They don't want the conflict to end. They don't want it to end. They need it to keep going, because once the music stops, then people are going to say, okay, well, the war's been solved or whatever, or it's over. How about our inflation? How about our economic situation, Mr. President or Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there with that. It is the perfect distraction to take attention away from how bad things are getting domestically as a result of, cutting yourself off from cheap Russian resources, which seems insane. So the question is,
it's like a vicious circle, isn't it? It's like a vicious circle, Yeah.
The question is, if they're willing to continue to push this to the limit, what then is Russia's limit? Because, I hear a lot of people say, well, Russia has like unlimited resources, they have unlimited manpower, unlimited this and that. But war ultimately is inflationary. And, they're having an attritional impact on Russia's energy infrastructure. There's debate about what the extent of that damage actually is. But the question then becomes, where do you think the limit is? Because I know one of the reasons why I originally wanted to get you on is because I heard you and Alex talking about the Tomahawks and how, the sentiment is seemingly changing, that the Russians, this whole diplomatic charade that is going on needs to be replaced with something more assertive. And so where do you think the line is, and what do you think the Russian response will be if this continues? Because it can't continue forever, can it?
No, it can't continue forever. And I don't think the Russian people want it to continue much longer either. For them, this is existential, right? This is, Trump is looking at this as the ninth conflict that he's going to solve, right? So for him, you get the sense that he's just looking to get another number on his notch count, right? Number 9. Okay, done. And for him, whether it's a ceasefire or whether it's a freeze or whatever, it doesn't matter. I solved it, so it's number 9 now. And he has this sense of being in a rush to solve it, right? And he's getting frustrated. But the Russians see it differently. The Russians are looking at this from an existential point of view. They don't want this to be like the Gaza ceasefire, the 20-point peace plan, where everyone understands that sooner or later that conflict is going to start up again because the root causes have not been addressed. Right? We got a pause is basically what we got. The hostages have been released, which is good. That's a good thing. Hostages, prisoners, everyone's been released, so that's most everyone. That's good. But the actual conflict is going to start, and the actual problems in the region have not really been addressed. And Russia doesn't want that. They want the problems to be addressed. And those problems are bigger than Ukraine, right? It's about NATO. It's about NATO expansion. It's about security interests. It's about a lot of different things. But NATO's a big piece to the puzzle. And I think the Tomahawks, what they did is they forced Putin's hand to finally warn Trump that this time around, I'm not going to be able to show restraint. And Putin has been showing a lot of restraint to his detriment. I mean, he's used up political capital by showing restraint. In the beginning, everyone's okay. He's showing restraint, fine. And maybe there were many reasons. It's still an SMO. It's not a war. And you want to get China on side. You want to get India on side. Okay, so in the beginning, everyone could understand the reasons. You're trying to get a deal. You're trying to get something signed. But, with each provocation, whether it was HIMARS or ATACMS or drones hitting energy facilities or whatever, or terrorist action on Russian territory, the killing of generals or journalists, which has happened, as you mentioned, rest in peace, Gonzalo Lira, stuff like that. All these things, Darina Dugina, for example. All of these provocations that have been happening over the 4 years have added up, and the Tomahawks. It's not that the missile is something that Russia's afraid of, right? The missile's old. It's not hypersonic. It's pretty slow. In Syria, they were knocked down. Serbia knocked down Tomahawks as well when NATO was bombing them. The missile is not the issue, as long as you're talking about non-nuclear. Okay, so Russia's very familiar with the Tomahawk. What they would not be able to hide was the fact that you would need American military or American contractors in Ukraine firing those missiles. If you're talking about the land launch pad. I mean, if you're talking about the sea, well, NATO once again, or U.S., right, launching them from their subs. So I mean, you couldn't hide the fact that it was going to be the United States attacking Russia. And when you think about it, throughout our whole lives, this was so taboo for one superpower to attack the other superpower in such a way. Yeah, you had proxy wars. Yeah, the superpowers fought in a third country. Okay, we understood all of that. We understood the games that were being played, the geopolitical chess. But to actually have the United States launching long-range missiles into Russia, however slow, however ineffective, that's something that Putin could not just sweep under the rug. He would have had to address it, and he would have had to retaliate. Otherwise, his own position in power would have been in jeopardy. He would have gotten he would have had a lot of doubts from the Russian people.
So is there a real sea change there based on your, contacts inside Russia, that morale, kind of is waning on how Putin responds to this next potential round of provocations? Like, is there a change now that people are calling for a more extreme response? I know Gilbert Doctorow made some controversial statements, and I'm not sure if you guys have interviewed him before. He's an interesting guy, in my opinion, has an interesting differing perspective than, Ritter and other people. But he was saying that there was potential coup concerns in Russia. Now, while that might be a bridge too far, you're talking about how Putin is now being pressured into taking a more assertive stance. And so if this Budapest conference summit fizzles out, what do you think the result is going to be? Like, what is Putin going to have to do if the war continues and they put more weapons into the fire?
Yeah, I think if you don't have the Budapest summit and no tomahawks are delivered to Ukraine, I think then the war is just going to continue as the generals have planned it out. Maybe things will ramp up. We don't know. We're not there. We're not privy to this information. A small select group of people actually know what the game plan is with regards to the Russian military and the SMO. If the tomahawks are introduced, then everything changes, obviously. But I think the call that Putin had with Trump, that call, the sense that I get from it, that I got, was Putin calling the United States, calling Trump, and he had two goals in mind. He wanted to first of all warn Trump about the tomahawks and make sure Trump understood the escalation, because Trump, he says a lot of things. He listens to people. He repeats the things that people tell him. Sometimes he does the things that people like Kellogg or Lindsey Graham tell him, without perhaps realizing the danger of what he's doing. And so I think Putin wanted to make sure that Trump understood, this time around, if you go ahead with this, then we're in serious trouble. I mean, this is a serious escalation for us. First of all, any diplomacy that we've had up until now is over. So that's done. And we're going to retaliate in a way. Now, retaliation can take many forms. Doesn't necessarily mean symmetric or anything like that. But Russia would be forced to retaliate against the United States, right? Not against Ukraine or anything like that. So I think that was the goal number one, to make sure that Trump understood what he was getting himself into. And I think goal number two is Putin wanted to make sure that Trump understood the situation on the front lines, because you're getting a whole lot of crazy propaganda about casualty numbers, about how Ukraine is winning, that Russian soldiers are trapped in cauldrons, or any minute now we're going to get them on the retreat, or stuff like that. And the Russian economy is crumbling. So I think Putin also wanted to just make sure that Trump understood that it is Ukraine that is losing, that Russia has a lot more resources than the media is telling the president. the economy is stronger than Bessent and these guys are telling the president. And I think he wanted to get that point across, that Russia can continue this for many, many years going forward, while Europe and the United States cannot. And that is true. The U.S. is depleted. I mean, the Tomahawks, very quickly, the Tomahawks were an idea that came about because the Americans could not get Patriots. Zelensky was asking for Patriots. I need Patriots. And the United States was out. And so what did the genius generals think of? They said, well, if we can't give you defensive weapons because we're running low, let's give you something offensive. That's how the Tomahawk started. A lot of people forget how the whole thing started. It was because the U.S. was out of Patriot systems. I mean, they have the Patriots, but they need them. They need them for the U.S. They need them for a potential smash with Iran, maybe something else going on. I mean, they just didn't have the Patriots to give to Ukraine. They're out of those. And so they thought up Tomahawks. Let's just go on the offensive. Just give him these long-range missiles.
So it would seem then that the Russians at some point will have to do something a bit more drastic in their response. And what kind of tipped me off that there was this sea change taking place is, yourself and a lot of other alternative media commentators starting to, call for a more aggressive response in order to check the West, because we all know the machinations of the West typically are such that they will continue to provoke until they're checked. And this, there's countless examples of this. And, Putin has the strategic forbearance of a Buddhist monk. This guy is playing the long game. But at the same time, I got the sense from watching your videos and other people in our acquaintance, in our circle, that this time people are getting worried that this is a new level of involvement, which would necessitate a response. And if that's what we're thinking, then that's what people in Russia are also thinking. So I think this is where I can kind of relate to what Dr. O is saying, in that there probably is some conflict, internal conflict there, that could potentially, maybe it's not that, significant at this point in time, but, should this thing continue along the trajectory it's heading, that there could be instability as a result of Putin giving some tepid response to the next rung up the escalation ladder. Do you think that Russian instability, what do you think the vulnerabilities are there? If you were to steel man, because I know you're pretty sympathetic to the Russian position. What are the vulnerabilities you think that Russia has right now in this?
Let me first say that for me, the issue with the Tomahawks and all of that, when we were discussing it on the Duran, for me, it was that if Russia, if any country did not establish deterrence to something like that, or let's say a nuclear power, if a nuclear power fails to establish deterrence, then I think the world is in big trouble, right? Because the thing can easily get out of hand, and you could end up in a situation where your only deterrence left is nuclear. And I think we need to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
So that's why I was saying, Russia needs to establish some sort of deterrence or diplomacy quickly before this gets out of hand. And the only thing they're left with is a nuclear deterrence. So that has to be avoided. And obviously, I think Putin and his Security Council understands all of this a lot better than I do, obviously. But I think that was the concern. Let's not let this get out of hand. And I think that was the concern with Trump, is that they needed to tell Trump, don't let this get out of hand. We've been managing this conflict, right? We know as Russia that the United States and NATO are behind a lot of this. We know you're providing intel and satellites, and you've got mercenaries on the ground, mercenaries and all these things. And we've managed this conflict, right? So it doesn't spill over. Please, let's not have this thing spill over. I think that was the message that had to be conveyed, and I think it was. But we'll see. We'll see. Trump can flip-flop right back to where he was again, and we're in trouble. But the vulnerabilities, I think let me say this for both sides, for both leaderships, I don't think either of them are in trouble. I don't think Zelensky's in trouble. I don't think Putin is in trouble. Are there doubts? Yeah. Is there discussion? Yeah. But I don't think either Ukraine and the West that sponsors Ukraine, or Russia and the Kremlin and the Security Council are looking to make any moves in the top echelon of the government. I think that would be too risky for both sides. I think both sides are sitting back and saying, these are the two players that we got, and we're going to have to ride it out with these guys, because if we make any kind of changes, vote them out, coup, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It could be exploited by the other side.
Yeah, it'll be exploited, and then we're in deep trouble. Yeah, so I think, whatever anyone feels about either of the two, these are the guys that are going to most likely take it to its conclusion. So I will say that. As far as Russia's vulnerabilities, I think Putin's vulnerability is one that he himself has admitted, his trust in the West. I think he has a trust in the West that he had with Germany and with Merkel. I mean, he's a child of the Soviet Union. He was many decades, many years in Germany. He's been president for 25 years, or he's been in power in one form or another for 25 years. And most of that time was dealing with the Europeans and the West. And he did have good relations at one point with many Western leaders. And he himself has admitted that he put too much trust in people like Merkel, and he got burned. And I think he still has that if you want to call it a weakness, that vulnerability of putting a lot of trust in what the leadership of the West is saying. And
one thing one thing the West is amazing at is Hollywood, and is creating fictional narratives about things. And so even though it's BS, they're so beguiling and charming with how they present this thing, like with the Alaska summit. That was a real show, right? Red carpet, maybe some symbolic decapitation strike symbolism with the bombers flying overhead. But nonetheless, it's, for some reason, they appear very trustworthy, in the moment. And then, ultimately it's a backstab. So he's up against something which is very tantalizing, and it's very easy to kind of be subdued by all the pomp and pageantry of it all. And so I can kind of get that point of view. And I do agree that, the East seems to have, they're playing in a different universe where, they're logical and they're rational. They got to just be like scratching their heads when they're watching Trump post memes of him shitting on his population.
Seriously, yeah.
Like the Hulk Hogan stuff, and may he rest in peace also. But, it's just a cartoon, man. And so you don't know what to do with this,
Yeah, it's a danger, but it's dangerous too in a way, right? If you put too much trust into these guys, then they're gonna sting you. But the other thing that you always ask is, after you see these memes and these cartoons and all of these things that are coming out from these leaders, you also wonder, are these guys really running the show?
Right.
It's a whole nother thing that all of the East, or say the global South, is probably saying. Are these guys really making decisions? Because sometimes you scratch your head and you say, there's no way that this president or prime minister is calling the shots. Yeah. Impossible.
Yeah, it seems impossible. Is there any other vulnerabilities that you see in the Russian, in terms of, strategy? And I know today Russia announced that they're going to be using reservists to protect strategic assets. And to me, you would that seems like something they probably should have done a while ago. But that they're thinking about doing it now signals that they're probably worried about more escalation in the future. What do you make of that? And have you come across that story today?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think you nailed it. I think they should have done this much sooner. But it's that old saying about Russians. They're slow to ride,
Slow to
but once
harness,
they
fast to
they're
ride.
slow to harness. Yeah, but once they get going, look out, right? So I
Right.
think this is classic Russia, right? They're slow to get going, but once they do, okay, they've got everything locked down. So yeah, they should have done this earlier. I think that the strikes on their energy facilities are pinprick attacks because you're talking about a massive country with energy facilities all over the place that the majority of which Ukraine cannot hit. And people, everyone says, oh, look at, there's a fire here, there's a fire there. Yeah, drones are hitting places. But when you go to like an energy facility, a refinery, whatever, these are massive structures. Some of these are the size of small towns, right? So I mean, it takes a lot more than a couple of drones every now and then to knock one of these things out. So usually the Russians, they absorb it, they fix it up in a couple of days, and then they go about their business. But then a drone hits another facility, right? So they go there, they fix it up, and then they go about their business. I think that the reason that they're now saying, okay, enough, we got to get reservists in place, is because I think the information war effect of this is something that they're finally realizing from an information space domestically as well as internationally. We need to start preventing these things. So I think that's where they're probably approaching. I'm not saying they're not doing damage. These attacks, they do damage, but I think it's much less than what the media is going on about. I mean, think of all the missiles and all the drones that Russia has launched into Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and it's taken a lot to try and knock it out. I mean, a lot of missiles, and Ukraine doesn't have any missiles that are hitting the facilities. I mean, Russia's been sending drones and missiles and drones and missiles for years now. It takes a lot to knock these things out. So, I think the reserve idea that they're putting together, like you said, it was a long time coming. They need to get a handle on this, and I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, it really is incredible. We're learning so much in this conflict about how resilient these countries can be, especially, countries that are, have more of an industrial base and, are based around raw materials extraction and stuff. These are economies that can sustain fighting for seemingly indefinite amounts of time. I think at some point, though, I mean, even if these are just pinprick attacks, like, I mean, eventually, especially if you're seeing a increase in the production of missiles, according to Ukraine and Russia as well, they're saying they're producing like 1,000 Duran drones a day or something. I'm not sure what they're saving them for because they've only been firing about a few hundred every other day. With some days they do 700, 800, which is incredible amount when you think about what we were seeing under Biden. It's almost tripled, if not quadrupled, on some days. But the Ukrainians are also touting all these new weapon systems. Like they have this new submersible torpedo, something like that. Like it's like this giant missile. They got, the flamingos. Not sure who comes up with these names. Yeah, other kinds of flaming missiles. And it's like, this thing, they keep firing more and more. So if the trend is towards more attacks, not less, and maybe the Russians figure out some defensive strategy to counter it, they probably will. Will it be in time is the question. And will it, I guess the issue is, okay, they're going to continue to provoke until Russia gives the response that they want, which will be used as justification for NATO to enter into the conflict, I presume. We're also seeing hybrid warfare spillover. So what are your thoughts on these Romanian, and I think it was Hungary oil refineries that, I don't know, maybe they weren't attacked, maybe it was just an accident. What are your thoughts on that?
Maybe it was an accident. I highly doubt it, but okay, it might have been an accident. Both refineries. The one refinery is is refining. The Hungarian one is, I believe it's MOL. It's the biggest oil refiner, and it deals with Russian oil, which Hungary needs, being landlocked, and they've explained it many times. Even Trump understands their position. And the other one was a Romanian oil refinery that was under control, ownership, or part ownership of Lukoil, the Russian company as well. That this comes at the same time that you have the whole Budapest summit thing going on, that you had Peter Szijjártó in Russia, the foreign minister for Hungary, attending an energy conference and talking about how Hungary's never going to just ditch Russian energy because they need it. It's in their national security interests, in their energy security interests. The fight between Orban and Zelensky, all of this going on, I think that would be some hell of a coincidence if all of a sudden you have these refineries at the same time. I think they were just an hour apart.
Yeah.
Busting out in flames. I mean, keep in mind that Poland, they let go the suspect for the Nord Stream sabotage. They let him go. The court let him go. And what was the excuse that they gave? The reasoning? Well, it's okay to blow up infrastructure as long as the person believes it's in self-defense of during a war. So, I mean, they actually justified it in that way. So, I mean, in a sense, what we saw with the refineries was in line with the Polish judge's decision when it came to Nord Stream, which is, look, if there's a conflict going on in the world, then infrastructure is fair game. It's a very dangerous, crazy precedent, but that's what Poland decided.
So, man, this is bad, because if they're blowing up, oil refineries in Hungary, if that's what's actually happening, and the CIA, Trump, is not calling attention to it, what does that mean then for that relationship? Because clearly, if that was happening and the Americans were against that, they would call it out. Wouldn't they call attention to it? Wouldn't Trump say, hey, it's a little suspicious that these oil refineries went up in flames when we were about to go and meet there? It almost seems like there's a force that is calling the shots that isn't. I mean, we all know that there's people behind Trump and special interests, but it really starts to be concerning that they're allowing that to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I mean, did you catch the interview with Witkoff the other day when he was speaking to 60 Minutes? And he basically said that the attack on Qatar from the Israelis, that they had no idea about it. That's what he claims. And they were even hinting that, it was the three-letter agencies along with Israel that kind of went ahead with this. And they were shocked about it. I mean, assume he's saying the truth. It looks bad either way, but just assume he's saying the truth. It looks even worse in that sense. It goes back to exactly what you're saying, that, my God, you guys are, I mean, Witkoff is in Trump's inner circle, right? Mm-hmm. And you guys had no idea that this attack was going to take place, and it fits right in with the refinery. I mean, as the United States, let's assume that this was sabotage. Maybe it wasn't, but let's assume it was. You guys don't know that this stuff is about to go down, and when it does go down, you're not calling it out. I mean, Orban's your boy. He supported you, Trump, when all the other European leaders were going against you. He vocally supported you, and now you're not saying anything about it. So, I mean, it looks strange, doesn't it?
Like Berletic would probably say that this is just perfectly in line with that notion that they're putting up this facade of division within the ranks to kind of create the illusion that there is like a good cop, bad cop thing going on, when really even Orban at the end of the day probably might be enticed by, hey, maybe we can win. Maybe we can balkanize Russia, and you get, maybe there's something being promised there. Like it's a balance of their own interests, their own national interests, and this broader agenda. And do you think eventually Orban has to be brought to heel. Apparently, he approved the 19th sanction package.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's having his arms twisted to a certain extent. And how do you see that situation playing out with Hungary and this whole thing?
Well, you bring up an interesting point. I think when the conflict first started, every leader was on board, like the first 6 months. I have sources that tell me every leader in Europe, in the entire West, was on board, because they thought that the sanctions were going to bring down Russia. That was the plan. The plan was this sanctions shock and awe was going to collapse the Russian economy. Putin would be toast, and that would be it. So everyone was on board with all of this. They were like, okay, if we're going to knock out Russia in 3 months with the sanctions, we got it. Let's do it. Then after the time passed, I think Orban was the first to realize that they're not winning this thing. Orban was smart enough to realize that once Russia beat back the sanctions attack, that they survived the sanctions attack, which was, it was harsh, man. They threw everything at Russia. They cut them out of SWIFT. They threw everything they had at them. They went after their central bank assets. Unheard of stuff. And Orban realized that that's it. We're not winning. We're not going to win this thing. If we couldn't sink them with the sanctions, we're definitely not going to sink them with an actual war. Actually, I spent a week in Hungary, and I met a lot of the government officials in Hungary on a trip there. And they told me it's not that they like Russia. They fought wars with Russia. They're not Russian friendly or anything like that. They said we fought 2 wars with Russia, and we lost both, and we just don't want to fight a war with them. And for us, they said that the ideal scenario is to do business with them because they got the energy. It's cheap. It powers our economy, but we want to keep them as far away from our border as possible. That's why they want a solution. Yeah, that's the way they're looking at it.
Very good way of explaining it. And so they're one of the few states that are landlocked that really have no alternative energy solution.
None.
Which is why everyone else can kind of.
Yeah. They could do expensive LNG truck. I don't even know how it would work, right? It gets into an LNG port and you truck it into it goes through the pipeline or something, but it's going to be expensive. It's going to be a lot more expensive than what they're getting now. The same with oil. They're landlocked. It's just the reality of their geography.
That's a very good insight. The UK, according to Sergei Naryshkin, the director of, I think it's Russian foreign intelligence, is claiming that the UK is planning more clandestine attacks, sabotage attacks in the Baltic and the Black Sea. What do you think of those allegations? And do you think that things could potentially flare up in another theater like the Baltics or Kaliningrad? There's a lot of rhetoric around that.
Yeah, I think Naryshkin, the Russian foreign intel, for me, is hit or miss. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't.
Okay.
But I think he puts out these warnings in a way to kind of call out the UK, many times to call out whatever other foreign entities are at war with Russia. So, I'm not saying maybe these signals are legit. Maybe this intel that he has is legit. Most likely there's some chatter going on, but I think he's there just kind of pointing out that the UK now is driving a lot of this, right? So he's kind of calling them out in a way. And they are. And the UK is driving a lot of this, no doubt about it. The UK, France, and Germany, the big three that are now the big sponsor of Zelensky. Whether the United States is also sponsoring Zelensky as actively as they were during the Biden years, perhaps, most likely they are as well. But the big three have been put in front. They've been put in the front, right? So yeah, the UK is definitely driving a lot of the madness. As far as another theater goes, they tried Georgia, and they're still going to try. They're still trying Georgia, but Georgia so far has held up to all the color revolutions. I was in Georgia for about a week, and I saw how everything is on the ground. They're trying Armenia, they're trying Moldova. They're not going to stop. That's the thing, and it just goes back to what we were saying earlier in the show. If Putin doesn't and Trump, if they don't sit down and address the root problems of this, then the West is never going to stop. And I think that goes back to why Putin still believes that it's worth engaging in diplomacy with Trump, because he probably says to himself, you know what, I've got someone, as erratic as he is, I've got someone who at least talks to us, right? So I might as well take advantage of it. And maybe we can get to a solution where all of this stops. Second front, third front, Ukraine, escalation, build up with NATO. I think Putin is looking at this from a big picture, and he's saying we don't want this going on for another 30, 40 years, this continued tension and escalation, and the collective West constantly picking around in the Caucasus or in other areas on our border or in Eurasia. We need we need a solution to this. And I think that's why he's so stuck on diplomacy with Trump, because could he have done this with Obama? No. Could he have done this with Biden? Absolutely not. So he's probably saying this is my one chance. But then again, the administration changes and everything can get, reset, right?
The irony, though, is that even though they're talking, the war is escalating, right? Yeah. So this is the crazy part. Is it good to have these conversations if there's nothing tangible? It seems as though every phone call, and there's if you look on Polymarket, every phone call or every meeting that Trump and Putin has is followed by another spike in hostilities. Yeah. So
yeah, I agree.
It's weird how we find ourselves in a position where, because I know if Biden would have ever threatened Tomahawk missiles or nuclear submarines, MAGA would have been up in arms, but for some reason they're oddly subdued. What is your take on the 12-point peace proposal by the Europeans? Is this just something designed to fail? Because it seems like it. I did a video on this yesterday. Is there anything different about this? And I guess first off, have you seen it? And is there anything that jumps out at you as a real concession compared to the one that they were putting forth I think it was 2 years ago?
Yeah. First of all, you made a really good point about Biden and the long-range missiles. Remember that Trump was campaigning against long-range missiles into Moscow. Remember that? He was giving speeches saying Biden is crazy. Yeah. I will never do that. I'm totally against long-range missiles into Russia. That was what Trump was saying on the campaign trail. Yeah. So you're right there. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's completely 180. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's what's scary about it is people are so fickle nowadays. We're just lambasted by news on a daily basis, and it seems like every day is like the past has been erased, and they're just looking at it, waiting to see what Trump says, and it's like you can't take anything he says seriously.
It's like the last person he talks to, that's what he's going to come out with, right? And it changes from day to day. And you can't, the world can't go on like this. It's sending markets are going haywire. Countries around the world they're souring towards Trump. I get a sense that a lot of countries are saying, we can't deal with this guy. There's no stability. There's no continuity. Yeah. Right. Today it's 20% tariffs. Tomorrow it's 220% tariffs. Why? Because I don't like the way you talked to this senator or whatever. It's just all over the place, man. And so I think a lot of countries now are starting to say, I see China's actually going that route. They're saying, enough. Yeah. Enough. We can't deal with this guy. And it's hurting Trump. He needs to settle it down. Maybe he thinks he's playing some elaborate poker game or poker match or chess or something, but he needs to settle it down a bit, because it's not helping. It really is not helping. And he's in trouble on three fronts. He's in trouble in Ukraine. He's in trouble in the Middle East and Gaza. That deal's crumbling.
Yeah.
That peace plan is crumbling. And he's in trouble with China. China called his bluff, man. They said, Okay, fine. Tariffs, no more rare earths. Done. And they called his bluff. No doubt about it. The 12-point peace plan, real quick, I just think it's the Europeans kind of muddying the water. I think they see that there may be some delay, some postponement, some tension between the U.S. position and the Russian position before Budapest. If we ever get to Budapest, maybe we don't even get there. But as they're talking, as the foreign ministers are talking, the media is saying that things are not working out. So I think they jumped on it. And they said, you know what, let's do like Trump's 20-point peace plan. Let's do our own 12-point peace plan. And let's put in the peace plan that Trump will be able to have his own peace board, like the Gaza peace plan, and Trump can chair the board. He'll be chairman of this peace board for Ukraine, and the United States can oversee everything. I think they're playing to Trump's ego and narcissism there. The rest of the plan is nothing different than what they've been saying for the past couple of years: a freeze, Russia paying reparations, all of these things that they've been saying for the past couple of years.
Do you think Russia will ever agree to paying reparations?
No, never.
Right. And so why, I guess the big question for some people is, why couldn't Russia just agree to freezing the lines where they're at, accepting that what they have annexed is theirs, and relinquishing the thought of going further? What is the big hang up with that, other than, okay, they're going to remilitarize Ukraine? And is the thought really that they're going to attack in the future, and that if we don't keep them on the back foot now, we potentially lose everything?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the Russians actually have presented a plan like that. They presented 2 memorandums after the Alaska meeting. The deal was that each side would prepare memorandums as to how they saw the negotiations moving forward. And so what the Russians did is they prepared 2 options. Option 1 was all 4 oblasts in their entirety are recognized to be Russian. And then you work towards a solution, right?
And that would include the other side of Kherson.
Yeah, everything. And as it is in the Russian constitution, let's say, or in the referendums.
Right. Which the Ukrainians would never agree to.
Yeah, but that was the simple one.
Yeah.
And then they talk about everything else, right? So that would be the simple solution. That would get a stop in the fighting. Okay, that's how the Russians presented it. You want there to be a stop in the fighting, President Trump? Then option number 1 is the simple option, which is, as our referendums, as our constitution says, all 4 oblasts, and then we can put a stop to the fighting and move towards negotiations. The second option was the package deal, I think is what they called it. That one actually did say that there would be some sort of a freeze on the front line, but they put the points in that you said as well. It wasn't just a freeze. It was no military support from anybody, United States, Europe, anyone, complete demilitarization, elections, addressing the denazification. There was recognizing the Russian culture, recognizing the Russian language. There was all kinds of other things in there which addressed what Russia has called their root causes. So those were the 2 options that they actually did present. But, it goes back to what you said. The big hangup that Ukraine has with the freeze is the demilitarization part of it.
Right.
No more Western interference is basically what Russia is saying. You want us to freeze the conflict? Fine, but everyone has to get out. And everyone has to leave. How
do you monitor that?
It has to get monitored. I mean, I'm sure there's mechanisms in place to monitor it, but that's the requirement that Russia has. It's basically Russia saying, "Look, leave us alone. You want us to stop fighting? Fine, but the West, just get out, butt out, and let us deal with Ukraine on this," because it actually makes sense in a way, the option number 2, because way in the beginning, the Russians were communicating with the Ukrainian side, and they did get a deal in the first month until Boris Johnson dropped into Kiev and ruined it all. So, I mean, in the past, they were able to find some sort of understanding.
And so
deal was much better than everything that's being put on the table now.
Just for clarification, what was that deal that they agreed to that Boris Johnson interfered with? What was the conditions of that deal? Do you remember?
Yeah, if I remember, I mean, I kind of remember it. It was okay. So Russia, in goodwill, they moved their forces out of the surrounding areas of Kiev and Odessa. So they moved those forces back. They sat at the table together, and they said that I actually think Zaporozhye and Kherson were not in the equation, right? I believe Donetsk and Lugansk were going to be, at least the parts that Russia controlled, which back then was much less. Those were going to, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but those are going to be seen as part of the Russian Federation. But once again, you're talking about a much smaller part of those areas. And then they were going to discuss other things like Odessa, the recognition of Odessa and stuff like that. And they were going to talk about the Russian language and Russian culture and all of these things being recognized by Ukraine. So, I mean, if you look at it from a pure territory standpoint, they had a much better deal back then.
Yeah.
But, they threw it out.
Crazy, crazy times. So I guess I have to ask you, you're living in Cyprus, and this is kind of a prepper question. I always like to conclude on a prepper question with my guests. At what point do people in your circle start advising people, might be a good time to start, preparing for things to go sideways if you live in Europe? I mean, NATO is already, individual countries are already sending out preparedness manuals. Some of them are fairly ominous in terms of the detail that they go into. Like, I know the Latvian one, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's fairly extensive in terms of talking about an actual Russian invasion and really the nitty gritty, the specifics with what to do when it happens. And a lot of stuff about dealing with misinformation and martial law and drafts and what your obligations are and how the government's going to expropriate all your stuff and your labor and send you to the front lines to die. At what point do commentators start, calling attention to that and advising people? Because I'm always like, if we know how these people play, then we should expect, where the game is going to go. And the game is likely going to get worse. Either maybe it's just economic, hopefully. Maybe it's some hybrid warfare. Maybe it's conventional war. Maybe it's nuclear war. But is there a point in which you are going to be advising your audience that, hey, maybe it's time to start preparing for things to get bad?
Yeah, actually, I do it often, to be quite honest, because I've lived it. As far as a military conflict, being in Cyprus on an island is difficult. I mean, we've been invaded. Turkey controls 36% of the north. What the Cypriots did back then is any Greek Cypriots or Cypriots in the north, when the invasion happened, they moved to the south. But they lost everything, right? They land everything. And vice versa, too. The Turks, the Turkish Cypriots that were in the south, they got displaced and moved to the north. So there was a movement of people, and whatever you had, your land, your belongings, whatever you could put on your back, that was it. You're on an island, so you can't really go any further than that. But from an economic level, I've lived it twice, man. I've seen the economic crash in Greece,
right,
and then I saw the worst, which was in Cyprus, which is when the banks crashed. The European Union came in and they took everyone's money. In one night, man, I tell people this all the time. When they want to go in your bank and they want to take the money, they will take it. And I saw it. I went to sleep on a Friday, and the government was trying to work a deal. It was a new government in place, and they're trying to work a bailout deal with the European Union and the IMF. And, there was a lot of optimism. Okay, we may have a deal, we may not. At first they wanted a 7% cut across everyone's bank account, the whole island. You're going to lose 7% of your earnings, so we can bail out the troubled banks, the toxic banks that we had here, right? So that was the first deal, and people said, no, why am I going to lose 7% of my wealth across the board? Just like bam, right away. And so then they were in negotiations to try and figure out another solution. And the The
So people
globalists, they
were
came up
racing
with,
to get money out of their banks.
well, there was optimism that that a deal was going to come. So people weren't racing then. Because,
Okay.
everyone had the sense, okay, it's a Friday night. Everyone said, okay, they'll figure out something, right? Well, the globalists in Europe, they figured out something. They said, you know what? These two banks, we're going to shut down the one bank, which was the second biggest bank. We're going to shut down half of the first biggest bank, and we're going to take everyone's money. If you have everything that you have over $100,000 and above, we're going to take. So if you had 150,000, you woke up and you had 100,000. If you had 200,000, you had 100,000. If you had 2 million, you have 100,000. We don't care if you're a business. We don't care if you're if you're a person. I mean, I know people who had businesses. I know a guy who had a marketing business, and he was going to make payroll on Monday. And, he had quite a significant amount of money. He has a big business, many employees. And everything just went to 100,000. It just
They
got
just
all wiped
took
away.
it.
Took it. You woke up on Saturday morning. Dude, I'm telling you, I woke up on Saturday. I went to get a coffee, and I didn't know what was going on. And I saw everyone like at the coffee shop, just like looking at their computer screens or their mobile phones. They were just like pulling their hair. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And I just asked the person, said, you didn't hear? I go, no, I just got here. What's going on? He's like, that's it. They went into our accounts and they took whatever we had. There was no legal remedy, nothing. And then they put capital controls on the ATMs. And they said, okay, you can only pull out up to 50 euros. I believe it was up to 50 euros a day and no more than 300 euros a week.
Wow.
I believe that was the setup. And that was for about a
incredible.
year or 6 months to a year. They had those controls on us. So you couldn't take out cash.
And that is perfectly in line with the messaging in these guides that I've seen is they make a point of saying right in the opening pages, like your main responsibility is to the government. And it's not about emergency preparedness. It's about continuity of government and civil defense. Yeah. And so, hopefully, are there things that you're doing? I mean, you don't have to get specific, obviously, for your own personal security, but are there things that people are doing now to mitigate that possibility? Obviously, your people are less trusting of the banks, I hope.
People are doing things to mitigate. You're exactly right. I mean, a lot of people got burned, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people are not. The majority of people are not. That's the surprising part to it all. A majority of people are back where they were before 2013 when it happened, and they're back to the level of trust that they had before. It's maybe it's human nature. I don't know. Maybe that's how the human brain works. But I think the smart people are doing things, learning from what they experienced in 2013. I think a lot of other people are just saying it's not going to happen a second time, or it won't happen a third time, right? They wouldn't do it again, would they? Well,
oh, shit. Oh, yes, they will. Well, you're in a strategic position because Cyprus, it is an island. It's the most southern, I think it's like one of the most southern points of Europe. So, if shit ever really did hit the fan, it would blow over you. You're kind of by the equator there. You got a nice like Mediterranean kind of climate. So I know the island is heavily dependent on like imports of energy and stuff, but I think you guys grow a lot of your own food and, I'm not sure what sort of inputs you need for that, but it's an interesting place and this low population, I guess.
Yeah, it's a low population place. I mean, it's all things considered, it's a good place to be. All things considered, but the lesson that I know that you're giving to your audience and what I lived through is that when they want to, you really don't have much power. When they decide to make a move, in Cyprus's case, it was an economic move. But when they decide to make that move, you better be prepared and you better act fast, or there's really not much you can do, man. You just got to learn from it. Then you got to hope that the damage that was done to you was not too much.
Wow.
And then you can prepare the next time around.
I think you should do a video on that. I'm sure you have, but I think I'd like to see like a dedicated video about your experience with that and that topic, because I think that's something that government overreach, this craziness that we're seeing being projected onto the world will ultimately be directed inwards at us. when the time comes. And we know that full well here in Canada, where they're trying to neuter us in every possible way and set us up for God knows what.
I mean, you guys
So-
kind of experienced it with the truckers, didn't you? In a way of going into accounts and closing them down. I mean, to a certain extent.
Yeah, they invoked the War Measures Act, effectively, and they cracked down on a lot of social media, and they're bringing in all these bills to regulate access to the internet and not counting firearms confiscations and all sorts of things. So they're incrementally trying to chip away at people's civil liberties to the point where if and when it does hit the fan, it'll be pretty easy. And like you say, most people never learn. Most people just go back to sleep because it's the path of least resistance, right? I mean, I kind of get it, because you want to live your life. You want to, nobody wants to put gold under their pillow, and, it's takes a lot of work. It's not the most secure thing to do, but, it's the only hedge against what is arguably one of the biggest threats, and that's government overreach, or, like you say, globalist multinationals, coming in and doing their thing, and, then they'll get away with it. And it's the
they always
biggest,
do.
could you imagine if like a criminal kind of did a home invasion and came in and stole all your stuff? Like, that's a crime, but they just did it. They just did it to everybody, So they violated 1.3 million people, whatever the population of Cyprus was, all at once, and they got away with it. It's incredible. What is that Stalin quote? Like, kill one person and it's a controversy. Kill a million and no one cares, or something.
Yeah.
It's statistic or something.
Yeah. And the funny thing about the whole incident, I remember it back then, was the banks, they only needed to be bailed out $10 billion. That's it. Wasn't much in the grand scheme of things when you compare it to the hundreds of billions they've given to Ukraine, which is not even a member of the European Union.
Yeah.
10 billion was pocket change, right? Yeah. But that the agenda was never to bail out and save the banks. The agenda was to give this thing a trial run. That's my opinion on it. But I think that there's also a lot of psychology that these powerful forces are interested in seeing. If we do this thing, and we go into the bank and we take people's money, what's going to be the reaction? How is this going to play out? I think there is a department somewhere, I don't know, somewhere in Brussels, somewhere in DC. I don't know where this is, but I think there's a department of people that are sitting there saying, let's monitor the reaction and how people react to this, short-term and long-term.
It's a good place to do a trial run when you think about it, because it's this island, of a small population of people, and I'm sure they got their social psychologists in there studying to see, what their reaction is going to be so that when they do implement this on a bigger country, they'll know what the response will be. And I think, whether it's COVID or that, or, military conscription, what we're seeing in Ukraine, they ultimately know what they've known for many, many years, is that people are very compliant, very obedient, very conformist. And when the time comes, the majority of people will roll over. And this is where people like us have to be careful, because, we're not easily subdued like the majority is. And so, all I would say is, try to at least stay close to that Overton window and not go too far out. Because I've seen a lot of people, fly too close to the sun, and it's not good usually. Usually they burn themselves out too fast. I think that Duran has been, fairly good at maintaining a balance of things, more or less. You guys are still platformed, and, I'm not sure what sort of headwinds you're encountering, but
I think everyone in our space encounters the headwinds. But, as long as you try to be objective, I mean, everyone has their biases. It's a basic human trait, right? Everyone's going to have their biases, but we try to be as realpolitik as possible. And if it means that we have to say that Russia's going to win this, it may not be popular with globalists, let's say, or with whatever government in Europe, but you're proven right at the end of the day, right? I mean, the thing is that you do have to say the truth as far as how you analyze things. And, if you think this is the truth or where things are heading, you have to tell your audience, right? Or like what you do, you have to tell your audience. If you don't, then you're doing a disservice.
Yeah.
Does it make you unpopular to certain groups? Yes, but in the long term, are you proven correct? Most likely, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I'm not sure if you've ever jumped into the NAFO algorithm, but you think because all we see is people who are circulating these open-minded discussions about stuff, and but there's a whole other universe in YouTube of these pro NAFO accounts that get way more views than this whole circuit of people. And it's actually incredible how divided people are by that algorithm. They never shall the two sides touch almost. And but YouTube has been, to their credit, they have tried to accommodate these alternative views where possible. I think, when they get enough pressure from the governments or whatever, they have to start demonetizing people. But I know a lot of people have been remonetized as of late. So, at least there's that. Anyways, man, I want to thank you for coming out. I think this has been an excellent conversation, and I think it was a long time coming for sure. Also, Absolutely. Where can people find more information about you and what you do?
YouTube, Alex Christoforou or the Duran, Alexander Mercouris. If you just go to the Duran on YouTube, you'll find all the links. We have a good locals community as well, an awesome locals community, the Duran.locals.com, and on X. You can also find me on X as well.
Good stuff. All right. Well, enjoy the weather down there.
Thank you.
I'll be vicariously living through this winter.
Oh, you're always welcome. Always welcome to come to Cyprus and enjoy it.
I will do that, but I have to wait how this tomahawk thing, pans out here.
Yeah, we'll be okay. I think this time around we'll make it through. But who knows?
Who knows?
As
man.
we said.
Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah, who knows what Trump will post on Truth Social tomorrow? Exactly.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right, man. Thank you. Thank you so much, man. Take care.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.